Well, science has finally confirmed what we've all known, and it's that we are hardwired for stories. In fact, we connect, we engage, and we're moved to tears, to laughter, to anger, to sympathy, and to action. And so it's for this reason that being able to tell stories is important when it comes to selling. Stories lead to a better understanding, trust, comprehension, and just a lot more. After all, we teach important ideas to our children via fables and fairy tales. We share episodes from our lives in stories. So it's important to understand and to learn how to create and write stories. But there are a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, customers don't really care what you have or what you've done. So that's not what you want to write about. Like everyone else, they're only really interested in stories that are somehow most often their own. So you should learn how to write the right narratives. So we're going to talk about that today. And how do you do that? The brain does not make much distinction between if you're reading about an experience or you're actually encountering it in real life. When we listen to a story, we actually live it. I don't know about you, but I actually can see it in my mind. People automatically link stories that they hear to their own experiences, and we find ways to relate somehow to those stories. I'm sure all of you are aware of Alfred Hitchcock. One of his quotes is, "Drama is life with the dull bits cut out." So if we can learn how to create drama out of our stories, but at the same time, we've got to be authentic in what we do. We're not stupid. We can tell when people are fabricating stories. And if we don't know right away, we'll eventually find out. So at some point, the truth is going to come out. And the brand that you're building will be in need of some serious damage control if it's going to survive. So always be authentic. The best way to look at examples of stories is looking at how advertisers advertise their products. There's a lot of different examples of this, but the lessons that I've learned are: number one, let your customers tell their story about how they use their product, your product or your service. Let them be the ones to tell it and then use that and plaster it everywhere. Ask them as they go through every point in your relationship, whether it's initially through the acquisition, through the delivery, through the service, whatever it is. How did you solve a problem or make their life better? And get them to tell those stories for you. Another lesson is to ask your customers to actually video themselves talking about why they use your service or your product and the benefit that they get from it. This is really, really good because, again, it's authentic. And then that's something that you definitely want to put out through social media. When writing a story yourself, though, there is an art to it, and they call it a story mountain, and you have to build up to it. So you start off by providing a little bit of background, an introduction, so to say. Then there's this rise in action, and it includes events that lead up to this main problem or some kind of a conflict. And when you get to the climax of the story, this is when the problem really reaches that high point. And then the following action is when your characters work to solve the problem or the conflict. And then there's the resolution. And this is how things end up in the story. It's the end of the story. So keeping those things in mind, One story that you can write or start with is your origin story. Why do you do what it is that you do? How did you come about doing this? So some of the questions you can ask and answer, like, well, what are your key products or services? What's the single most important thing that you promise your clients? Describe your organization's personality. What advantages do you have, or what makes you different from your competition? And then, is there anything weird going on in your industry that you could talk about? Then for the next piece of it is the who. Describe your ideal client. Who decides to buy your product or service? Who influences that decision? Who is your audience? That needs to be identified. And then prepare to tell your story. Include what your passion is. What do you love to do? Why did you start your business? How do you incorporate your passion into your business? And then, what type of a person wants this? Because it's got to match up. That story has to match up to who your benchmark of a client is. And there are various different types of stories. Like we said, there's customer stories, there's employee stories, there are fictional character stories. Once you get a good story, then the key is to make it go viral through social media. And when you think about why people share something, ask yourself, when you are thumbing through Facebook, what is it that stands out to you? And when you share it, why did you decide to share that? And normally, there are several reasons that we do it. One could be it's our need to feel significant. Oh, look what I found. Let me share this with you. Somehow, stories are shared if they provide some sort of an opportunity for us to, make a statement. Somehow this is like, yeah, I believe in this. This is me. I understand this. It's that statement of identity. This is who I am. But don't fall into the trap of nursing your need for significance. Be careful about that as far as how you write those stories. But those stories need to be a couple of things. They need to be powerful, they need to be moving, or they need to be hilarious, or they need to be shocking. Because if it's just a run-of-the-mill blah, 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 those kinds of things don't go viral. That's not going to be shared. So it's got to be something that's powerful for sure. So when you think about stories, let me give you an example. Mary goes to the store. So what? We don't care. To buy some milk. Still don't care. For her baby. Well, maybe we care just a little bit. Who is sick? Oh, maybe we care a little bit more. And hasn't eaten in days because a neighborhood bully stole most of her money on the way home from work. Now we care a lot. So make sure you delve into and you tell the story, that there's a completeness to it. You've got to make me care enough to want to listen to it, enough to want to hear it. The steps that as if I were to give you 4 steps, think about, number 1, what's your objective? What do you want your audience to think, feel, or do as a result of this story that you're going to write? Number 2, look for some relevant success or failure, or some moment of clarity around a main idea. And then number 3, make one up. This is if you strike out. Just make sure that your audience knows that you've made this story up. So you may have to create like an analogy of something. If it's a made-up story, that's fine. But just make sure that you say this is a made-up story. And then step 4, list and choose. So pick the story that best delivers the main message. If they're equal, pick the one with the most relatable hero, the most relevant obstacle, or the most engaging struggle. Keep in mind, ask yourself, why should I listen to this story? When and where does this story take place? Who's the main character and what do they want? What was the problem or the opportunity? What did they do about it? How did it turn out in the end? What did you learn from it? And what do you think I should do? Those are just some examples. A little exercise in writing a story is kind of a fill in the blank, but you can use this. I think the best example I've seen of blank that was blank, back in blank at blank, there was blank, and they were trying to blank. Then one day, blank. So they blank, and then blank, and so they blank. Eventually, blank. What I learned from that was blank, and that's why I think you should blank. Kind of a funny way when you say it like that, when you read it out loud, but it's a good little fill in the blank exercise to kind of get you to get into the flow, into the rhythm of writing stories. But stories absolutely sell. Again, the next time you're watching TV, pay attention to the advertisements. You will see great examples of stories. That's all for now. Thanks.